A while ago, I remember one manga catching some attention. I actually gave it a read myself back then, but it was still in its early stages to the point where there are barely any chapters, so I finished up what there was and put it down. But I didn't forget it. The manga was always in the back of my mind, and it's only fairly recently that I decided to pick it back up again now that it's all done. And the name of this manga is I Think Our Son Is Gay. It's honestly kind of a funny name to me, a bit like those overly wordy and complex isekai titles that literally explain everything about the story. This manga is literally just about a mother who thinks her son is gay, but let me get into the actual specifics. The protagonist of the manga is Tomoko Aoyama, a middle-aged wife whose husband is frequently working away from home. They have two kids, the youngest being Yuri and the eldest being Hiroki. And it's become a bit clear that the eldest is a bit, wait a minute, I'm doing one of those gay little hand gestures, but you can't see that, so just imagine one for me. Point is, Tomoko is pretty sure Hiroki is gay, though he hasn't told her anything about it. That's the most frequent plot of the early chapters, Hiroki usually saying something that hints towards his sexuality and then getting flustered. Like, for example, when the family is talking to Hiroki about learning how to cook, he just blows it off saying he'll get a boyfriend who can cook for him. Or when he leaves a raunchy magazine out where his mother can find it. These moments make the series fun to read on a smaller scale since the plots are simple and Hiroki's reactions are quite funny. The longest running problem, well, not necessarily a problem, facing Hiroki is his crush. His name is Daigo, and he's been Hiroki's bestie since childhood, and it's clear to Tomoko that Hiroki likes him. His younger brother Yuri has also picked up on the fact that Hiroki is gay, usually sweeping into cover for his older brother. On the surface, this makes it seem like a standard queer slice of life story, but there's things about it that make it atypical and really stand out. The first of which being is that despite the manga being about Hiroki, he's not the protagonist. The real purpose of the manga is not whether or not Hiroki is gay, but Tomoko's reaction to it. Future Fury here, guess what? As I was writing this, Japan's High Court rules that its ban on gay marriage is actually unconstitutional. Remember to like and subscribe and give a hell yeah to the good news in the comments. The manga doesn't even pretend that Hiroki being gay is a question because it's just not the point. And the conflict is not one of acceptance. Tomoko is alright with Hiroki being gay. It's her wondering if she's handling having a closeted gay son correctly, which is just another thing that makes the manga distinct. I've never read any story, let alone a manga, with a plot like that. The target audience for this manga isn't necessarily people who are gay, but their loved ones. There are people who relate to accidentally seeing a gay porn mag on their son's desk, to thinking of a loved one when someone says something homophobic. And a lot of this uniqueness goes into making the manga feel real. And I don't mean real in the same way some people do, when real is just a shorthand for bloody action in a grim dark world. I mean real in the sense that the mother works too. I get how stories tend to over-idealize the mundane, especially when it's stuff that's not important, and I'm fine with that. It's a little weird that so many animes have stay-at-home moms, but let's be real here, it doesn't matter. But the realism in this manga is very important when it's aimed at teaching acceptance. There's even stuff like Tomoko and her coworkers gossiping like real people. That the only reason Hiroki excelled in math in middle school was because he thought his teacher was hot. There's even Asumi, a girl who ends up getting a crush on Hiroki that obviously can't be reciprocated. And the relationship between Hiroki and Daigo and Asumi is another one of my favorite things about the manga. It's not necessarily a love triangle, more like a love line, maybe? I don't know. The point is that Asumi never sees Daigo as a rival, rather the three of them are pretty good friends. Each of them supports Hiroki in their own way. Daigo is more of a tough love kind of guy, where he points out what Hiroki is doing wrong, while Asumi is on the opposite end, pointing out and praising what Hiroki does right. It's an interesting dynamic the three of them have that Tomoko can observe as an outsider. Silently rooting for Hiroki as he goes after Daigo and inwardly cringing when she sees Asumi pine for Hiroki. The manga even covers a long stretch of time, helping make it feel more real. It goes from Hiroki, who was in 10th grade, to his final year of high school, yet the pacing is very smooth. It breaks down such long stretches of time with its quick, super digestible chapters. Like seriously, I think a whole chapter is only around like 5 pages. Not full-length stuff, but long enough to only have the conflict, so the series moves at a brisk pace despite how much time it covers. Though there are some longer chapters thrown into the mix, especially when it needs to cover something that's like really important. And the characters slowly change as time goes on, Yuri noticeably getting taller, adding to the feeling of realism. Even stuff like the homophobia not being virulent hate speech, but stuff like off comments and people saying stuff that they probably shouldn't. It's less like getting called a slur and more like watching an episode of Friends.
How do I look?
I think you look great. Joey, that bag is gonna get you that part.
And a date with a man.
A character will say something, like talking shit about a gay TV show, and you'll just feel the urge to suck in air through your teeth. They didn't mean anything wrong, but if they thought for like 3 seconds, they wouldn't have said that. Which brings me to the next thing that's realistic about the manga, that being that there's no real antagonist. Just people who probably aren't as accepting as they should be. The only character who really comes close to being what we could call an antagonist is Tomoko's husband and Hiroki's father, Akiyoshi. But that's really because he's the only reoccurring character who frequently has brushes of homophobia, and even that isn't virulent. It's usually off comments or questions that put Hiroki on the spot, like asking when he'll get a girlfriend, usually requiring his mother or younger brother to swoop in and smooth things over. Notably, the manga does have him use the word fairy when referring to gay people, which I think is a good way to convey that he's being more than a little senseless. I suppose a less tactful way for that to be translated would be something like fag or queer. Slur or not, unkind or not, that was just what he called people like that growing up, and he hasn't really changed. He's not malicious, just someone stuck in old prejudices and stuff. Of course, he's not the only one, namely, there are Tomoko's gossiping coworkers. One of them, Miss Higuchi, is even a fujoshi. And for those that don't know, fujoshi, lit rotten girl, is a Japanese term for female fans of manga, anime, and novels that feature romantic relationships between men. It's always nice to learn stuff, isn't it? The main thing her and her coworkers talk about is their boss, Mr. Tono, who they speculate is gay. It's actually these moments that really stand out to me because the author really managed to capture how people talk about the LGBT community behind their back. It's not necessarily mean, but they are a lot less cautious when they don't think anyone of that community is listening. I think the specific moment that stood out to me is when they dedicate one of the larger chapters to someone saying that it's a waste that Mr. Tono is gay. And Tomoko's introspection is so sweet, deciding that if someone's actually enjoying the time they spend with someone regardless of sex or gender, then it's not a waste. Because such a thing isn't for others to decide. I think Tono is actually one of my favorite side characters in the manga due to his relationship with Tomoko. He's really the only openly gay man she knows, and as such, he serves as a lesson onto a lot of things, like whether or not stuff is a waste of time. She goes to him for advice regarding Hiroki, and it creates some of the sweeter moments. The last character I really want to talk about is Hiroki's younger brother, Yuri. Yuri is kind of asocial. He has friends, but they aren't as pronounced as Hiroki's. He keeps himself usually deadpan, often more in control of the situation than his older brother. That being said, the one big thing that gets him emotionally invested is Hiroki himself. Obviously, the big thing about Hiroki is that he's closeted, but the manga expands on both their feelings towards that with a flashback from when they were both way younger. It starts with Yuri getting bullied by classmates for being more of a girl's guy, you know? So his peers start calling him a homo, and I do mean that verbatim. He just gets called a homo, like straight up, or well, I suppose I should say like gay up. Of course, Hiroki comes up to defend him, only to get called a homo too. While Yuri is capable of brushing the insult off, there's a moment where he focuses in on Hiroki's expression. It's a sign of vulnerability, showing why Hiroki chooses to stay closeted. And it also quietly shows why Yuri takes Hiroki's side and covers for him. That's his brother, he loves him, and he knows this kind of stuff actually gets to him. And later in the manga, Daigo tells Hiroki he's a good person, which touches on Hiroki's tendency to sell himself short, but the chapter is actually a two-parter. The second part focuses on what Hiroki sees as his shortcomings, and he says this. He said I never say anything bad about anyone, but there are some people I just don't like, and I think mean things about people all the time. I even lie sometimes. He doesn't know everything about me. I've tricked him. Obviously referring to the fact that he hasn't told anyone he's gay. And Tomoko saying that if he's feeling guilt for being gay, then she wants to let him know that she disagrees is great. I think now's a good time to throw in a spoiler warning because I want to talk about some of the ending. As part of my research for this manga, I actually looked up any interviews that the author has done, and one part that stuck out to me was this. Something equally amazing and wonderful does happen to them. In I Think Our Son is Gay, there are many positive characters, so I try to keep the story positive as well. Which really does follow into the ending, which is all about learning and becoming better. For starters, it has Tomoko finally talking to her husband about their son being gay. And while he thinks it's a joke at first, instead of getting angry or upset, he just realizes how shitty he's been. These characters are good people, and there's nothing stopping them from learning, growing, and changing. There's pretty much an entire chapter dedicated to Akiyoshi noticing how times are changing and moving forward and having him embrace that fact. The manga even goes further than just Hiroki. Notably, Yuri is the polar opposite of Hiroki. He's always been popular with the girls, but he's never pursued them himself. There's the question on whether or not he's gay, but in actuality, he's asexual. And we get to see him actually connect with someone over that fact. And remember that Fujoshi Miss Higuchi? Well, she's actually writing her own boys love story and wants Mr. Tono to be a sensitivity reader for it. The only issue I kinda had with the ending is that Hiroki never comes out to his parents. It just seemed like a payoff that was missed, but again, the manga isn't necessarily about Hiroki being gay. It's about Tomoko's reaction to it, so that payoff isn't necessarily needed. I will say, I do like how Hiroki and Daigo never end up together either, since his crush ends up getting a girlfriend. It's sad, but it's also realistic. And there it is again, that R word. It may seem like I'm harping about it for no reason, but it matters in this case. Personally, I think realism is often overrated. People want to read interesting things, which doesn't necessarily mean realistic. Just look at Dragon Ball. Realism is a good way to make things interesting, but it's not required. However, it is something that's necessary for what this manga is trying to do. Like I said before, the target audience for I Think Our Son is Gay isn't gay people like Hiroki, rather people like Tomoko who have gay loved ones. And the story's realism only serves to make the characters more relatable, making it easier to put yourself in their shoes and thus understand its message. And the manga is all the better for it, giving us a story where we can see ourselves learning and growing, free to be who we are. And that's why I recommend you read it. It's getting late, so let's finish this video with our Patreon shoutouts. For our 3 stars, we have special thanks to Choron, SkyKing64, 87 Wero, Garen LaFay, Zora Chow, Venomous, Rylaboom378, and Jay Stassi. For 4 stars, we have Miko, McCoides, and Utterly Awe, the star insignias. And for our super duper special 5-star shoutouts, we have first, The Good Old Days, The Drunken Tiger, followed by Hodari Lion, The Wild Freedom. Thank you for watching. Do be sure to like and subscribe. As always, this is Joe's Fury signing out.